Okay. Welcome to session D14. I'm the host of this event, and I want to introduce the two presenting teams today. The first is by Peter Kozik and Corey Bay from the US, and it's entitled A Dialogue About Empowering Pre-K to 16 Education. And then the second presentation will be by Toby Can and Trine Norkoiv from the UK. And the title is How Digital Technology Supports Student Well-Being. So take it away, Peter and Corey.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Dan. So I'm trusting you can see my screen. And we're here to talk about empowering K-16 education. And we focused on these frames of relationship, experience, and reflection. You'll be seeing these ideas recurring throughout the presentation, and they'll help us sort of focus our conversation with one another, which is really what this dialogue is about. I'm from Keuka College, and I represent an institution. We'll talk a little bit about it in a moment, but we're talking about a partnership that Mr. Bay and I have been part of now for about 9 years between the college and a local school district that's really helped and enabled our student teachers as well as teachers at the school district to be able to really sort of develop themselves as teachers and as relators when it comes to education. So hopefully we'll be able to take some Q&A at the end of this, and we're hoping to engage in a conversation about it. But first, what we'll do is really talk through a number of different things as we talk about the evolution of this particular partnership. So just to start, this is us, a picture of Keuka College. We're on Keuka Lake in the Finger Lakes in New York State. Really, really beautiful campus. What's important to know about us is we have about a 900-person undergraduate population, about 300 graduates. And I represent the Educational Studies Division, where I teach a course on adolescent methods. And I'm part of the Educational Studies Division that also includes early childhood educators as well as elementary educators. We certify at the high school level, at the secondary level, in English, social studies, biology, and mathematics. And we represent about 140 students altogether at this point. Undergraduate, we also have a graduate program in literacy that leads to a master's degree. And we have 4 full-time faculty and probably about 3 or 4 adjuncts and instructors who are also part of the division. So we have quite a contingent of students, and our adolescent methods students usually number about anywhere from 5 to about 14 in a given year. And they're the ones on whom we're going to be focused. So Mr. Bay, tell us a little bit about Prattsburgh.
Gladly. We are very, very rural, low socioeconomic school district in upstate New York. We're and also very small. You know, we're a pre-K-12 building, and we have about 375 students pre-K-12, and we have one building. So we're pretty unique in that way. And our proximity to Keuka is something, and Dr. Kozik and I will get more into that, but I'm presently the superintendent here at Prattsburgh, and I've been here for 20 years, and I've been a teacher, principal. I've pretty much done everything. So I definitely am invested in this community, this partnership, and everything. So, you know, that's a little bit about us. But I think, and I'll say it again, I think some of the most important things is that we are so rural, and we are a very low socioeconomic population, and that's where this partnership benefits even more. So we'll get into a lot more of that stuff as we go through this. All right, I'm going to continue right on in the genesis of the partnership, this is something that, in my opinion, is incredibly important as far as how this all started and how we were able to establish this relationship. Because what I will say, and Dr. Kozik, I'm sure would agree, is this is not a normal relationship. This is something that, and I, we use the word cutting edge all the time, but we definitely are way ahead of a lot of folks in the fact that we do have a long-standing relationship and the things that we've been able to accomplish over the years. And and I don't want to tell the whole story, but like I said, I've been here for over 20 years. So I've been here from the beginning of this. And it started out, I'll be honest, it started out quite selfishly in the fact that, my former superintendent and myself, we were talking about, hey, we've got this resource right down the road. What I think we're 15 miles away. And we said, hey, let's be involved in the training of our next teachers. So selfishly, we started to get involved, and, we wanted to have control over what our teachers knew and what our teachers were prepared to do. So the next generation of teachers, we wanted to be involved in that. We were involved in mock interviews, and then it morphed into a summer relationship where master's level literacy folks were coming here and doing their practicum work to get, they were doing case studies with students. And then it transitioned on, and Dr. Kozik probably remembers this. I think he remembers this the same way as me, that I think we had this crazy idea to have the methods class right here in Prattsburgh, have a college class happening right here in school where we get into classrooms and everything. And I don't want to get into too much of the specifics of it because we'll get into that, but that's kind of the way it's transitioned over the years. So started small, but then it has continued to grow throughout the relationship.
So as Mr. Bay and his superintendent, Joe Rumsey, were talking about what they needed and how they wanted to influence future generations of teachers, we were also reconsidering our program at the same time. So it was really a pretty opportune time to kind of combine forces and kind of bring us as a college into the school district. So our methods courses were all 1-credit courses in those different certification areas that I talked about earlier, but they focused on content and they didn't focus on pedagogy. So we redesigned the program, brought those methods courses back into housing them in the Educational Studies Division, focused on pedagogy, made it a 4-credit course, and really right away, we started meeting at Prattsburgh Central School District in a classroom. And that was really the sort of the first step in the process. Now, the way we started this was as I mentioned, were put in a classroom. So I taught in a classroom at the school district, but of course you might imagine without too much more connection and relationship developing, there was a really limited capacity to use and utilize the idea of a partnership and develop our relationships more fully. So I taught on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and students came to class at Prattsburgh. What we did was invite teachers and administrators into the class to be able to talk to us about what it's like in a school district, what kinds of evaluations might be in place for teachers in school districts, integrated curriculum and how different teachers in the school district were integrating curriculum. So we had a series of topics that we focused on, but again, everything was provided and presented in the classroom. And it was really only after we started to think a little larger and think about the kinds of relationships that we could potentially develop beyond the classroom that things really started to change and develop, and the partnership really started to mature. So we really learned while teaching. So this was back in 2012 when the partnership started and when I started teaching in a classroom. And really the next year, was the first year that we realized that we had personnel on the Prattsburgh campus that could influence students at Prattsburgh. So we began to push our students out into classroom experiences, starting with working and tutoring some of the students who needed support. And for the most part, these were students who were differently abled. So they were challenged by school, and we put them in one-on-one teaching situations with some of our student teachers so that we could influence their achievement a little bit. And that was really the first step out beyond the classroom that began to help this particular partnership evolve in some ways. So we began to take advantage of those possibilities and begin to extend and broaden our thinking in some different ways the year following our classroom experience. Mr. Bay, I don't know if you want to add some things to what I've talked about in these first steps.
Yeah, I do. And, like Dr. Kozik said, everything was coming into the classroom, and now we've transitioned into getting the classroom out into the school. And, from my perspective, what I was seeing is, number one, we were seeing, there was case studies being done on students that could be shared with present teachers, future teachers, that was authentic work done by Keuka College students. And then from another perspective, I could see, I had the ability to walk throughout the entire school, and I could see that there were things happening in that classroom that was benefiting everybody. That, the Keuka College students were teaching lessons. They were tutoring students. So they were doing, there was so much, and this word may be overused sometimes, but just the authenticity of the learning for everybody that was going on was, it's been tremendous, and it continues to evolve. And I think probably one of the biggest things is the trust, the trust factor between Keuka College and Prattsburgh Central School, because that's a huge thing. This couldn't happen without the trust. And, you think about a school atmosphere, just letting, you just let these Keuka College students free in your building. There's definitely a huge trust factor. So that's been, it's been just super beneficial for both entities, no doubt.
And just to add to some of that, as this particular partnership developed and as it matured, as Mr. Bay said, students started getting out into classrooms. So we developed observations for the students to be able to use. And I think Mr. Bay will agree with me that the teachers who were being observed by some of our students, they started to up their game in some ways, and their teaching started to improve. They started to have conversations with student teachers about the learning that was going on in their classrooms. At the same time, we structured the interactions that our students, our Keuka College students, had with Prattsburgh students. So one of the things that we did, for example, was I would drive a van back and forth with our students, and we made the van a rolling classroom where we would talk at the beginning and prepare for what the events were going to be like for the day, what kinds of observations they were going to be doing, and how they interacted with their students in their tutorials. And then on the drive back, we would have structured protocols that we'd talk about to get a sense of what our students were seeing in classrooms and reflecting on how those different observations could affect their teaching and sort of change their minds about what good teaching looked like. So here are two examples of the kinds of protocols that we structured in. And this was probably in year 4, 5, and 6 of this particular partnership. On the left, you see a checklist that we provide to all of our Keuka College students when they go into their tutorials. So they're looking at specific aspects of universal design for learning to make sure that there's engagement, representation, and action expression on the part of their students. They talk about what they're thinking about and write about what their thinking is like and what their decision making is like based on this checklist. And they're invited to respond to and think about how they could improve their practice as a result. So even though they're one-on-one with these students, they're regularly filling out this checklist and regularly thinking about what they can provide for their students and what kinds of decisions they can make. And the case studies that Mr. Bay referred to originally, which really started as a sort of a singular assignment without terribly much more elaboration, really developed into something much more rich and really much more involved in terms of how students thought through how they were tutoring these students and working with these students. And on the left-hand side, you have an example of an observation protocol. So every time a student goes into a classroom, they have another set of questions, another set of observations. This particular observation protocol focuses on transitions, pace, what the classroom is like in terms of management and how behaviors are managed. And they also look at, in these protocols, things like advanced organizers, cues of different sorts, how group work is established in the classroom. So every time they go into a classroom, we look at another set of principles that might look theoretical. However, they're looking at the application in real time. And we're talking about this. We were talking about this on our van ride home. So this really enriched the relationships that we had with one another, with the teachers, and that the students had with the teachers and with the students at Prattsburgh.
Okay, I'll jump in here. Barriers, this is a huge piece of this. And when Dr. Kozik and I were preparing, we got talking about, some of the barriers, maybe not that we've had, but the ones that you would run into. There definitely would be some. We talked about, some schools are just saying, no, we're not interested, and there's some with lots of administrative turnover. One of the biggest things and one of the biggest reasons why this works is the fact that we do not have any teacher pushback. You can imagine you would have teachers who would not be interested in having these college kids in their classroom. And we've developed a culture and climate here in Prattsburgh where, the rooms are open, they're laboratories. Let's use them to figure out how to better teach kids. And it has been amazing that our teachers, now we've established such a relationship that they expect it. They're like, well, where are the Keuka College students? When do they start? We want to get them in here. And, so we're definitely lucky that way, but there could be lots of barriers. And then of course, the one that we all have to talk about is COVID. We were not able to do much last year, and it became, one of those things where we knew how much we missed it, and we've been able to, even though we're still in the pandemic and we've got a lot of health and safety protocols, we opened our doors back up to get Keuka College back in here, because that's how important we think that this is for, once again, we not only for us, but for the Keuka College students. It's got to be beneficial for both.
So go ahead, Mr. Bay.
Go ahead, Dr. Kozik.
I was just gonna piggyback on the idea of the COVID, because as an institution, we've also taken our knocks for the last year and a half, 2 years, as far as COVID is concerned. So we shifted to online back in the spring of 2020, came back person to person, and midway through the fall semester, there was a lacrosse party that was unsanctioned that infected about 150 undergraduate students. So we immediately shut the campus down and went back to online. And as a result, I went back to teaching this particular course online. We hadn't been able to connect in the meantime with Prattsburgh. This was last semester in the fall. And as a result, my focus shifted to looking at how to redesign the course to make it try and approximate what we had done at Prattsburgh. And we used video simulations and videotapes to try and get students thinking about practice. It wasn't the same because that relational element that's so important to why this partnership works wasn't there and wasn't evident. At the same time, I restructured the course to focus more on particular elements of teaching and brought those to the fore. Things like group work, for example, which got shorter shrift before. However, now we're able to move some of those topics back into my teaching and into Mr. Bay's work and into Prattsburgh's work as a result. So in some ways it improved our courses, but it definitely weakened the level of relationship that we were enjoying with Prattsburgh. And we're back to really enjoying the kinds of give and take that's been so much a part of the partnership going forward. So Mr. Bay, I interrupted you.
Oh, hey, you're good. On to, I'm even ready to go, going on to lessons learned. The next slide, one of, I think, the most overarching lesson that we've learned over the years, that this work is extremely important and valuable to all of us. And that's why it's important to continue to not only continue to do it, but to continue to evolve. And we've talked about, Dr. Kozik and I have already started on, all right, here we go. Let's not be complacent. What are our next steps? So, we're talking about doing research, in our classrooms, because we really want to continue to look at student achievement, because that's the #1 goal, looking at student achievement. And, one of the things we're already talking about is how does relationships, especially in this day and age, how do relationships impact achievement? So that's one thing we've started to talk about. So just things that we're already starting on our next steps, because we need to continue to evolve this relationship and keep it fresh. We want to get the mock interviews back. We want to continue to offer professional development opportunities for the Keuka College students, because that is so important, having the opportunity to talk to real life teachers, real life principals, and get some ideas about, because we all know, taking college classes is fantastic, but it's nothing like the real thing. It's nothing like being in the classrooms, having conversations with teachers and administrators and students and parents. We've even had Keuka College students participate in parent-teacher conferences and talk to parents. So there's just so much authentic learning that's going on, and we want to continue to go down that road.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could just comment to the chat, you're absolutely right. This particular partnership would not have been possible if Prattsburgh Central School District wasn't the kind of place that it is. And it's continued to be that sort of special place where relationships are valued, where that's really the key to how it's a high performing school district. Mr. Bay didn't mention the fact that, US News and World Report every year for this tiny school district in New York State awards them honors, silver certificates and gold certificates for their achievement and for the fact that they are able to educate students in an environment that's close, that's rich, where people care for one another. And there are other school districts and rural school districts that are much closer by for us. And it was Prattsburgh that reached out, and Prattsburgh with whom we partnered. So we're very, very blessed. And I'll say, I guess, in closing, that my students say inevitably and invariably every year that Prattsburgh experience was the best experience of the course and the best experience of my undergraduate years. That gave me real value. I understand much more about teaching and relationships now than I did before. So thank you.
Hey, and this question just popped in, and I don't want to take anybody's time, so I'll answer it quickly. It's funny that, and I want to make sure I say it right. Treen, right? Did I say it right? Treen put the question in the chat. Has the program contributed to higher retention of the students? I will say, and Dr. Kozik knows this, we hire so many Keuka College students because, like I said, selfishly, we're in there and we're getting our word in when they're sophomores and juniors in college, and they don't just show up here interviewing and not know the place. Most of the Keuka College students who interview here know a lot of the teachers. They know what we're all about, and they've applied here because this is where they want to work. And with a teacher shortage, in which we definitely have, we have to even be better at that, training them and recruiting them back. So yes, the long answer to that question is yes, absolutely.
And this is a junior level course. And the other advantage is that Mr. Bay, through his networking with other superintendents, if there is not a position available at Prattsburgh, and he's seen these students and worked with these students already, he can put in the good word up the line to other districts. So our students do get hired, which is really phenomenal. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, Peter and Corey. You've just whetted our appetite. I'm sure there's tons more, but that sure gives us a good little glimpse into the great work that you're doing.